I was the CIA asset covering Iraq and Libya at the United Nations from 1995 until the Iraq War in 2003. And I worked in anti-terrorism as a specialty, and we developed a peace option for Iraq that would have made the whole conflict avoidable. We had the peace option on the table. That it was weapons inspections, the FBI task force. There was also special contracts for American corporations. We could have had everything we wanted. The CIA was very demanding in what they expected Iraq to give them. It went way beyond the official UN Security Council resolutions. We wanted priority contracts for American corporations in telecommunications, healthcare, hospital equipment, transportation. Iraq offered to buy 1 million American manufactured automobiles every year for 10 years. And I laughed. And they said, well, how about 20 years? And I said, no, 10 years will be fine. They offered special preferential contracts in oil. They offered at one point, right before the war, to give us the Lukoil contract from Russia and to take Russia's contracts away from them and give them to U.S. companies. And that wasn't enough to satisfy the greed of the United States.
Tell us your involvement now when you go towards Iraq, more with Libya and your involvement with that before the invasion, all that stuff going on right now. Tell us your background on Libya.
I was involved in the Lockerbie negotiations for the trial, the handover of the two Libyans. My CIA handler was in Lebanon during the hostage crisis in the 1980s, and he was on the ground when Lockerbie was planned. The bombing of Pan Am 103 was planned. And that was involved, the CIA had infiltrated heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa Valley, and they were taking a cut of the profits, big-time cuts, making millions and millions of dollars personally profiteering as well as financing the black ops. And so the Defense Intelligence Agency team accused the CIA of having a rogue agent who was double-crossing them. Every time they'd close in on the hostages, the double agent was allegedly reporting it to the Hezbollah, the Islamic Jihad. And so the hostages would be moved. So the Defense Intelligence Agency called out an investigation from Washington, and those guys came out and they got heroin, they got money, they got documentation. They were all flying back to Washington on Pan Am 103 the morning that it crashed, when it blew up out of the sky. And when they died, when all those people died, it killed off all knowledge of the heroin trafficking out of the Bekaa as well, and the CIA's role in heroin.
So now we're talking more about Iran and all that and the escalation, whether it's going to happen or not with World War III with Iran or not, based on, would you agree probably, this is kind of a funny question, but would you agree already that we're already at a covert war with Iran already based on the economic sanctions that have been going on with their nuclear program or their economy or their dollar collapsing, their I forgot the name of their currency, but something involved with that? Do you think there's already a war, most likely, but the media is not covering it?
That's a really good way of putting it, a covert war and a proxy war. I look at Syria as a proxy war because Syria has a long relationship with Iran, and they are Shiite. And America's allies in the Middle East are Sunnis, the Saudis particularly, are radical Salafists. They believe in Sharia. They're very deeply conservative and fundamentalist. They are not moderate. They are not pro-democracy. And yet across the board, you see the United States supporting Qatar and Saudi Arabian sponsored, financially sponsored revolutions in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya. All of these are backed by the CIA, and the CIA is supporting the Arab Spring, and we're providing guns, financing, we're training them in propaganda. And that's very important. The CIA is behind a lot of the anti-war propaganda, or the pro-war propaganda supporting the Arab Spring.
So anybody else, just for any viewers out there know about, tell us about other whistleblowers that you know of or doing your great work of exposing this to the world about the criminal activity going on. Any people you know involved with whistleblowing, such as yourself?
Well, the one who breaks my heart is Bradley Manning. Bradley Manning needs all of our support desperately. He is. I'm afraid that they've raised the he's okay. For those of you who don't know Bradley Manning's story, he was the young soldier who released the security tapes to WikiLeaks, which Julian Assange published. But he also released videotape of war crimes by American soldiers in Iraq. And he was accused of aiding and abetting the enemy, which is a serious punishable offense, and treason with a possible life sentence. My fear is that by threatening him with a life sentence, they're actually going to come back and hit him with a 20-year sentence or a 30-year sentence and say, oh, see, we're being generous here. We're being lenient. And that's terrible, because let's put this in perspective, that Lindy England, who was involved in the crimes of Abu Ghraib, the torture, the hideous abuses of Iraqi prisoners, she got 3 years in prison. She's out already. And they want to give Bradley Manning, who has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and he's been in prison 900 days with no trial. They've refused to give him a trial, and they've held him in solitary confinement for most of that period. They subjected him to every 15 minutes. He was on a suicide watch, and I, having been in prison myself, I can tell you that in a suicide watch, every 15 minutes you're required to say your name or answer a question, so that you never fall asleep at all. It produces an induced psychotic state. The reason my story was kept quiet was that I was arrested on the Patriot Act and thrown in prison on Carswell Air Force Base. And so I actually have a lot in common with Bradley Manning, but I was held for 1 year. I was under indictment for 5 years. I was never allowed to have a trial at all. And it was only after 4 years under indictment, after my release from prison, a year and a half after my release from prison, that I was allowed to have one morning hearing, a hearing with 2 witnesses. One of them was a congressional chief of staff. The other one was a university professor who confirmed that I was an intelligence asset, and that we did warn about 9/11 because I told private citizens about it. But I was accused of being incompetent. I was told that they portrayed me as a religious maniac. Though I do believe in God, I'm not an atheist, but it's just the most ridiculous argument that anybody could make if they know me. And it was not supported by any reality, but national security has now become about dumbing down the population. It's actually not to protect the nation's security, it's to protect congressional security, White House security, because if the people have the facts, the people will throw these guys right out of office.
Well, it just shows, too, how the government has the war on whistleblowers going even more, taking it to the next level every year, regardless who's in office, whether it's Bradley Manning or Sybil Edmonds, even the FBI translator, and such as yourself, and many different other whistleblowers who are coming out and exposing the truth, because you people like yourself should be rewarded for all this stuff. And it shows how the government treats people when they have a conscience and speak out against crimes or a particular attack that you've known months before 9/11 and knew exactly what was going to happen.
No good deed goes unpunished in Washington. Count on it.
Just to wrap it up here, tell us about your new book and what it exposes in that book, or more of the background to that, and how you got the name for that book.
My book is Extreme Prejudice, the terrifying story of the Patriot Act and the cover-ups of 9/11 in Iraq. And it's really cool. It goes inside the Iraqi embassy and prison on a Texas military base. And that's it's insight to Iraqi pre-war intelligence that you would never expect. And it proves that there's never a time when diplomacy cannot achieve results. Even in situations that appear hopeless, we can still solve these problems. And I'm absolutely convinced we can stop a war with Iran. And it shows that how 9/11 was used in a real sense to create the war with Iraq, and all the steps that were taken to the easy protocols that were ignored, that were stopped in order to guarantee that this war could be implemented. And it's important because today we're looking at war with Iran, and my CIA contacts are telling me that we expect more false flag operations because that's how they know they can drive us into this war. They know we don't want to go. That we're going to go kicking and screaming all the way. But what they'll do is they'll create probably several escalating threats, strikes again and again and again to drive us into this so that we feel compelled and hopeless. So,
just as one last positive message, all this, not really negativity, but it's all about the truth. We know that, so we can't put a pass sell on truth. But just as inspiration, what you mentioned before, that great message. I don't want to paraphrase, I don't want to butcher it, so I'll let you explain it, that great message you mentioned to thinking that people out there, it's negative or not, but we still have hope in beating and defeating whatever the enemy is or any of that. Just tell us what you mentioned tonight.
Listen, we can do this. We absolutely can. There's so much power in our movement. The people do have power. We are not in a hopeless situation. Simply by standing up and refusing to be ignorant, by letting them know we're not fooled, that false flag operations won't work on us anymore, that we're not duped. That makes it much harder for them to get away with this. And really, the military does not want to fight this war. The intelligence community does not want to fight this war, and the people don't want to fight it. So we have powerful allies if we reach across the table and help each other.
All right. Thank you, Susan, very much. I appreciate it.